So we talked about this when you were on the Global Guessing Weekly podcast,
Mm.
and just given the recent news coming out of Iran, I just wanted to ask it during this section. What would you forecast with a number if, if I'm going to enforce some global guessing rules on you, that Iran and the US agree to rejoin the nuclear deal by the end of this year? There was a lot of analysis about Raisi,
10%,
who, okay, 10% off the bat.
if that.
Why?
Effectively, the with the new Iranian election, new president coming into power, the Iranian parliament has moved very far to the right. You know, effectively during the last when we did the JCPOA, the Iranians actually had quite a lot of moderates in power. The election after that, the one that a couple of before this one, that effectively they would lose a huge amount of their and they were filming more and more to the West. Even when I was in Iran, almost everyone has a degree, almost everyone is educated. They kind of weren't that, like, oh, well, we've tried this whole revolution thing. Maybe it's time to come in from the cold. And during that period between the JCPOA and smashing the sanctions back in, life got better for the Iranians. French invested a lot of money in the car industry. Germans got involved in the telecoms industry. Everyone was chucking money at Iran. The economy was doing better, and sanctions back in, and everything went back 100 steps. Now the new makeup of the Iranian parliament as president are hardliners because everyone went, well, why would we trust the US? Look what they just did to us. We got good, and then we didn't break any rules, clamped down on us. So the Iranian parliament is now full of extremists who will never make that deal. We just happened to have this great alignment of like when the US had a more progressive and open president in at the same time the Iranians did, and fantastic, that worked. We got a JCPO out of it. It was the hope is that the more we open up Iran to Western trade and Western powers and Western, to blue jeans and rock and roll, that eventually the old, the guys who fought in the revolution and the old Ayatollah, the guy, all of those guys will leave political relevance or just generally lose elections. With more US investment and more westernized, because again, you got to realize that 50% of Iran's population is under the age of 30. So the
Hmm.
more blue jeans and rock and roll they get in there, the more chance Iran actually comes in from the cold. Pretty reasonable US partner. We've
So,
probably killed that for 20 years now, though.
yeah, so that's sort of where Andrew and I were coming in with our forecast. I think we're at about 20% on our website, but
Mm.
I was sort of viewing it from a different angle recently that, opened up my mind that maybe it's actually higher than we're considering, which is Raisi and the hardliners basically have complete control of the government, parliament, presidency, and there's a lot of media that Raisi might become the next supreme leader once the Ayatollah passes away, which gives them a much longer sort of time horizon in which to achieve their goals. And if they have complete control of the government, perhaps returning to the JCPOA, use that as a short-term benefit to release a lot of the economic constraints on their economy, pivot more towards Russia and China to rely on, so that should sanctions come back on the country, they're less devastating moving forward. At the same time, Iran has sort of achieved a lot of strategic and military goals within the region, either directly or through their proxies. And so they're kind of running on a high. They're having sort of meetings with Saudi Arabia and Iraq, and a lot of other countries are sort of engaging them again. And so perhaps it makes sense for them that in the short term to not develop a nuclear program for 3, 4, 5 years, because in the long term that doesn't make a major significance in terms of their ability to defend themselves, but they sort of get that long-term benefit of decreasing their country's negative impact from U.S. sanctions and the like. I don't know if you have a sort of thought about that framing of the context.
So the Iranian nuclear issue is really interesting because, you know, unlike North Korea, that if North Korea gave up their nukes, it's going to be pretty easy to their bite back is a lot less. With Iran, they can close the Strait of Hormuz. They have much more influence through the Middle East than probably everyone gives them credit for, as well as the fact that particularly for Saudi Arabia, yes, the oil wells can be hit, but it's the desalination plant freak out Saudi Arabia. There are no rivers in Saudi Arabia. and the desalination, the amount of fresh water they have in reserve is only about 14 to 20 days. So, and it takes years to build a desalination plant. So if Iran hits all of them, and all of them are now that they've have the Houthis support in Yemen, they can hit all of the Saudi desalination plants in one hit, which effectively means the whole country is without water in 20. That's a nuclear option they have even without nuclear weapons. Nuclear weapons, though, they can always aim and go down that road and make that to then give them up later. It gives them a huge bargaining chip to go, hey, we'll give up nuclear weapons, and in exchange, you have to allow Western companies to invest back in Iran. And the US politically, that's a good deal for them. If Biden can, perk his hand up and go, I got nukes out of Iran, I did it. Wave the Chamberlain white piece of paper in the air. That's a good political deal to take. It's just another poker chip for Iran to play, because Iran already has the Strait of Hormuz. It has destabilization of the Middle East. It has the hitting the Saudi desalination. It has the Houthis in Yemen to cause real trouble in Saudi Arabia. It has Lebanon to, groups in like Hezbollah to really push into, poke at guys like Turkey and Israel. So yeah, Iran has a lot more cards to play than just nuclear weapons, as well as the fact that look at how difficult it was for the US to take Iraq. We lost thousands of soldiers taking Iraq, and it's practically a flat sandbox. Whereas Iran, they're all better trained. They're all much more, Iraq is 3 nations smashed together. Iran is a real cohesive nation of mountains, and it's going to be, if you thought taking Iraq was hard, good God, taking Iran will be an absolute nightmare. So a lot more cards up Iran's sleeve to play than other, anyone like Libya or North Korea.
But still, you're saying 10% rejoining of the
10%. For at least, ask me again in 5 years if they show that this combativeness with the US was not a good idea. But any politician that goes on Iranian television, look, we should trust the US. Maybe we can rejoin and be better in the future, is immediately going to get we did. They screwed us. No deal. We've burnt the conversation for 5 to 10 years now, at least.